Hi, we're here with Phil Sumner, SVP Global Data, Audiences, and Tech at Publicis Groupe. How are you doing, Phil?
Yeah, all is good. Crazy start to the year. I'm sure everyone's going to say that, but good to be busy.
So let's dive right in. Why is attention important? And do you kind of feel like 2024 is going to be a leap in conversations around it?
Yeah, it's kind of, will it be the year of attention? It's kind of like it was the year of mobile for many years of my career, and now it's the year of attention. I'll take the second part first. Is there going to be sort of an inflection point with attention this year? I don't know. I kind of feel like we've sort of gone to that point of inflection with attention actually over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. I think it will change and it will keep adapting, and aspects of moving from sort of media to creative, which, I'll probably go into in a bit more depth later on. But I think that's going to be a big change. I think it's going to evolve. I think there's a realization in the industry. I can't speak for the industry, but I think there's a pretty wide realization now that it's beyond just a bit of industry buzz up there. That's, another frothy thing that we're talking about. Everyone's going, oh, let's talk about attention. I think there's a sort of groundswell that, yes, it's something that's important. Yes, something that we should look at. Yes, it's something we should keep on testing. And it's giving us better information, a lot of information that we've had for the last sort of maybe 10, 15 years, especially in digital, that gets us sort of back on the track of bringing some of the measures such as reach and things like that better correlated with what the outcome is. And so, there might be a bit of bias on that based on the people I speak to. You don't get that many people. You get a few who are like this, what's this attention thing about? It's nonsense. It's just noise. It's another thing. So, I get a lot of people going, yeah, of course, it's something we should latch onto. But, it's important. It's always been important. It's one of the oldest foundations of, think about attention through the lens of advertising. It's one of the key principles of advertising, and always has been. So it's not a new concept. And, we've been looking at attention advertising for many, many years. We've just had an acceleration over the last few years. We can measure more, we can understand its importance at a brand level, and it's an exciting time. But again, trying to manage those expectations, it's not going to solve every problem. It might be different for different brands in different countries and different sectors. So this whole sort of, oh, it's going to solve everything, that is a nonsense. It's not. It calibrates us back. It helps us get back towards something that's sensible. So I think, we just need to keep managing the expectations that way. And yeah, so, to summarize, I think it's in a healthy place. I just think it's going to keep evolving.
Well, if you were to ask advertisers, do you care whether someone is paying attention to your ad? They're going to say, of course. But then when you get into the details of attention measurement, do you think some of it's because there isn't a standardization, or that maybe they talk to different people and they approach it different ways? So they're thinking it's hard for me to wrap my head around exactly what attention measurement means.
Yeah. And therein lies again one of the other big issues here is sort of definitions. And I think calling this whole area, on the realized side, but the other vendors and media side, calling this whole thing attention, going back, we probably should have thought of something better than calling it attention, because it's so broad. And you speak to 100 people, and 100 people have different definitions. And that creates confusion that you didn't have with viewability or other measures. I can't think of any, but because it was much more prescriptive, whereas attention's like one of the, as I said, its definitions are myriad and vary massively. So having this big thing called attention creates confusion.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that we spend time as an industry getting together to better define it. And I see, the big industry initiatives, what the ARF have done over the last, I think they released their big 120-page report maybe 6 months ago, the work the MRC are doing, and other players. I think this sort of better definition is coming together. We as an organization are trying to do it, to try and simplify it, to break it down to sort of actually what is what is attention? It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say it's easy, but we're sort of narrowing in on this kind of definition of saying, look, you have sort of three subclasses of attention across both media and creative.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about biometrics, which is facial coding, eye tracking, GSR, or whatever, have biometric informed proxies, which is sort of these at scale models that the likes of Adelaide and Lumen and others have now. And then we have proxies, which are based off sort of geometric sort of viewability plus plus, as we would have called it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can classify that as attention, but it's not informed by biometrics in any way. And they all have their validity. They all have their validity, and they all come into play at different points. But making that clear, that distinction clear, I think we have missed it a bit, and we need to go back and do a bit more work on that, because no one benefits from that.
Right. So the the end client, the advertisers, the big brands, they want simplicity. And I guess this is true with everything. When my agency partners, the technology companies are saying something, I know exactly what they mean.
Yep. Again, a common language, a simple common language in whatever part of society or money, having a common currency that works. Actually, currency has different connotations in this debate, right? But a common, let's say, lingua franca sort of trading language between buyer and seller and all the actors in between helps. It reduces friction, it reduces surprises, and we can all benefit. And a lot of time is wasted, I would say, based on what I've seen, with people buying things which don't deliver what they thought they delivered or had a different methodology. And a lot of time's wasted doing that. And it's quite frankly frustrating when all the information is out there.
You talked a bit about media attention and creative attention. How does Publicis sort of, what's the perspective on whether those are, two completely separate things to be viewed in a vacuum, or whether it makes sense to view them together and sort of think about them holistically?
That's sort of the $6 million question. And look, I think you're gonna speak to different people, and you're gonna get different views across the group. Within this organization, Publicis, we have big media organizations like Zenith and Starcom and Spark, and big creatives like BBH and Saatchi & Saatchi and Leo Burnett. Will have a very different view on sort of what attention is. I think there's a realization now, again, as we've sort of matured, that these two strands, we've gone, the industry's sort of fragmented and gone this way, and I understand the reason for that, and it's sort of made sense.
Mm-hmm.
The media route was, it's easier to scale. These models can get adoption quicker. You take the factor of creative out, it's easier to have this sort of these measures that go far and wide. So in a sense, the fact that we focused on media as an industry is kind of logical. It's not a sustainable position, in my opinion, long term, because it's only one part of the picture. And if we believe in all the the evidence over the last sort of 40, 50 years is that, maybe not 50 years, but creative is up to 50% of the effectiveness of an ad. An awful lot, we've neglected an awful lot of that part, not thought about them together. So we've gone that way. We have to bring them back together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. There's not a single answer for that. There's not a silver bullet for that. And I think it's going to look very different for different brands, different parts of the world. But to look at them in isolation now I don't think is a tenable position, in the near future. So we've got to get our heads together. And I don't think it's a massive ask. And I think this is one of the things about expectation settings. I think when we talk about creative, a lot of people, on the media side run a mile because they can't control it, don't necessarily understand measuring it. And, there are different types of creative measurement. There's coming in at the early process doing, biometric facial coding, looking granular and understanding how to improve attention and emotion. And that's appropriate for some campaigns where there's big investment levels, and it doesn't need to necessarily be that. It can come in algorithmically much nearer the point of campaigns being placed. And there are a lot better tools out there that will take a mass of creatives and give optimization suggestions on the fly. Or there's even the fact that you can look at creative in so much that you have creatives running in channels where they're not fit for purpose, for example. You know, that's sort of the raising the floor exercise. When we think about creative, you've got many creatives running in channels that have an average, you know, attention of sort of 2 seconds, and brands not showing until 10 seconds, right? Which, if you think about it, is nuts. So when we talk about putting media and creative together at that base level, there's a huge opportunity by creatives which are just really not doing their job. So I think we need to think about it as sort of a layered exercise up, bringing these things together in appropriate ways for brands and how big campaigns are and what the budgets are. I don't think it's a massive ask, but you know, it's easier said than done. But no, you know, to conclude, I don't think it's a sustainable position to have these things really separate, which they have been. We've got to bring them together.
Great. Thank you for that expansive answer. Hypothetical client of yours coming to you guys and saying, we haven't really embraced attention. How do we get started? Like, what is the advice for companies that are trying to get their feet wet in this space?
It's probably going to be a little bit vanilla, my answer for this, because I don't think it necessarily differs that much from, you know, if we'd said some other form of sort of measurement. So I think those sort of principles apply. Look, I think it's really important that just because, you know, there are big bits of work out there that show the link between outcomes and improved attention, and there's actually a great amount of work out there now that's been put out that really has helped push this whole thing forward, because I think the proof points are really, really robust. But just because it works for one brand or one sector is no guarantee that it's going to work for you, especially when we talk about creative as well. You know, how's that going to work for your brand? How salient is your brand? How important, what levels of attention do you need for your brand? Therefore, you know, how prominent does the branding need to be, for example? It's very nuanced at a brand level. So just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it works for you, which means you've got to think about testing what attention is and doing it specifically for your own brands. Like, you've got to go in and you can't base it on what's out there. You've got to sit down and go, we need to prove that this works for us. Think about our dynamics and go through that process. I think that's really, really important. So that's probably the first thing. You know, we kind of touched upon it. I think the clarity on what's being bought, right, and where it comes in terms of the whole planning process, I think is really, really important. And again, that's, you know, you rely on the vendors, you rely on your agency partners to educate you, and you've got to be clear, because, you know, in many instances, you know, seeing research bought that doesn't serve the purpose that the advertiser thought it was setting out to achieve. So I think the methodology point is key. I'm a big believer in setting learning agendas, because they focus everyone to a testing regime and they get everyone on board for what those goals are. And I think they can be done well. I think more often than not, they're done probably quite badly because they try and overcomplicate. So, you know, with brands trying to sort of dip down into it, I think defining really simple learning agendas, not making them too ambitious, with really clear hypotheses is absolutely fundamental, because it gets everyone working together. You know what the outcome is you want to achieve, and you do it in bite-sized chunks. So, you know, those are probably 3 key things I'd look at, among many others.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for this. This was really informative, and we covered a lot. So I really appreciate it.
Good to speak to you, and look forward to sharing more thoughts on the subject.